Every death in this video was captured on camera, in safety reports, in warnings that were filed, signed, and then completely ignored. The evidence existed before these workers ever stepped foot into danger, and still, nobody stopped what was coming. So ask yourself this: if everything was already on record, why did these people still have to die? There is something uniquely chilling about a death that was recorded. Not just caught on a security camera after the fact, but documented in safety reports flagged by inspectors, written down in memos that sat on someone's desk and went nowhere. Most tragedies carry the sting of the unexpected. These ones carry something worse. They carry proof. Proof that someone knew. Proof that the danger was real, visible, and named long before anyone got hurt. And proof that the warnings were ignored anyway. Every single workplace in this video had records. There were inspection logs, maintenance sheets, training files, and in several cases, actual footage. The paper trails existed. The cameras were rolling. Workers had raised their concerns out loud in writing and sometimes directly to the people in charge. What happened next is the part that will stay with you. Nothing changed. The machines kept running, the rotas kept filling up, and men and women kept walking through those doors without any idea that the danger waiting for them had already been cataloged, described, and filed away somewhere nobody ever bothered to look twice. That is what makes these 5 cases different from a simple accident. An accident is something that could not have been seen coming. What you are about to hear is something else entirely. These are stories of deaths that lived in the paperwork first. They were predicted by the equipment failure reports, by the OSHA violation notices, by the workers who pulled supervisors aside and said, "This is not safe," and were told to get back to their station. The deaths came second. The warnings came first. There is a particular kind of grief that comes with that knowledge. The families of these workers do not just carry the loss, they carry the awareness that the loss was avoidable, that a signature on a different form, a phone call made earlier, a single piece of equipment properly maintained would have sent their person home that night. Instead, they got a knock on the door, they got a phone call, they got a moment that split their lives clean in two, before and after. And they did it knowing that somewhere, in a filing cabinet, or on a hard drive, or in a court exhibit, the proof of the negligence already existed. This is not about shock. These are not ghost stories. These are documented failures, recorded in real time in industries you recognize, in workplaces that look exactly like the ones people go to every single day. And if they can happen there, with all the evidence sitting right in front of the people responsible, then the question you should be sitting with right now is a simple one. What is being ignored where you work? In the summer of 2019, a 22-year-old named Wyatt Whitebread climbed into a grain bin at a farm co-op in Indiana to help move corn that had clumped and hardened near the bottom. It was a job that federal safety guidelines said required a harness, a safety line, and a second person stationed outside at all times. That morning, none of those things were in place. His supervisor had been cited for the same violations 2 years earlier. The paperwork was on file. Wyatt sank into the corn in minutes, the grain pulling him down, the way quicksand pulls a person under, slow at first, then all at once. By the time his coworkers realized what was happening and called for help, he was buried to his chest. Emergency crews worked for hours. He did not survive. The co-op was fined. The fine was less than the cost of the harness that could have saved him. Different industry, same ignored warning. In 2021, a maintenance worker named Daniel Cruz was sent alone into a chemical storage tank at a processing plant in Louisiana to check a faulty valve. The confined space entry log, required by law, was not filled out. The gas detector his company owned had a dead battery and had not been tested in 4 months. The maintenance log showed this: Cruz passed out within 2 minutes of entering. A coworker who went in after him without any breathing equipment also collapsed. Both men died. The records sitting in the safety office that morning showed the detector had failed its last 3 checks. Nobody had ordered a replacement. Marcus Hill was 28 years old and had worked a forklift at a distribution warehouse in Ohio for 3 years. A camera mounted above the loading bay captured everything. It showed the forklift with a known brake fault that had been reported in writing by 2 separate operators in the 6 weeks before the accident. It showed Marcus driving toward the loading dock edge during a busy shift, plus the brakes failing to hold on the slight downward grade and the forklift going over. The footage was submitted as evidence. The maintenance request forms were submitted alongside it. Both had the same date stamps. The repair had never been scheduled. Elena Vasquez was a 34-year-old mother working a night shift at a textile factory in North Carolina when a safety guard on a cutting machine was removed to speed up production. A floor supervisor had noted it in a report 6 weeks earlier and marked it urgent. The report was acknowledged by management via email. The guard was never replaced. The camera above Elena's station recorded the moment the machine caught her sleeve. She was pulled in before anyone could reach the emergency stop. Her daughter was 9 years old. As Thomas Reedy had 17 years in construction when scaffolding he was standing on at a building site in Pennsylvania gave way. An inspection 3 days earlier had flagged 2 of the connecting pins as non-compliant. The inspector's note read, "Do not use until replaced." The pins were not replaced. Thomas fell 40 feet. The inspection report was dated, signed, and sitting on the site manager's desk. 5 workers, 5 industries, 5 completely different places. And yet, if you line the records up side by side, something becomes very hard to ignore. In every single case, the danger had already been written down before anyone died. Not suspected, not guessed at, not pieced together after the fact. Written, dated, signed, filed. The grain bin co-op had prior citations for the exact violation that killed Wyatt. The chemical plant's gas detector failure was logged in a maintenance report that had been sitting unactioned for months. The forklift brake fault had been reported twice in writing before Marcus ever climbed into the operator seat. The safety guard that killed Elena had been flagged as urgently non-compliant and acknowledged by management via email. The scaffolding pins that sent Thomas falling 40 feet had been marked "Do not use" by a certified inspector 3 days before he stepped onto them. Different industry, same ignored warning. That phrase is worth sitting with because it is not a coincidence, it is a pattern, and patterns do not happen by accident. They happen because somewhere along the line, a calculation gets made. The calculation is not made out loud. Nobody writes it in a memo, but it is made nonetheless. At the end, it goes something like this. Fixing the problem costs time and money. The chance of something going wrong today is probably small. Production cannot stop. The deadline is close. So the report gets filed, the email gets sent, and the problem gets added to a list that nobody gets around to finishing. And most of the time, nothing happens. Most of the time, the workers go home. The shortcut pays off for another day. But every now and then, it does not. And when it does not, the record that was supposed to prevent the tragedy becomes the evidence of it instead. The very paperwork that should have kept these people alive is the same paperwork that proved, in courtrooms and in OSHA hearings, that the companies had known exactly what they were risking. May Wyatt's family sat in a courthouse and watched a lawyer present the prior citation that matched the violation that killed their son. Daniel's co-workers gave testimony about the dead battery in the gas detector that had failed its last 3 checks. Marcus's brake report was played back on a screen next to the warehouse camera footage. Elena's supervisor's urgent flagging email was read aloud in full. Thomas's inspector report was handed to a judge with the words, "Do not use," still visible in capital letters. The record was always there. It just was not enough to change anything while it still could have. Here is what all 5 of these workers had in common. They went to work trusting that the people responsible for their safety had done their jobs. That is not a naive thing to believe. It is a reasonable thing to believe. It is the basic agreement that every worker makes when they show up. I will do my part, you will do yours. Keep the equipment maintained, follow the inspection reports, replace the faulty part, file the form, and then actually act on it. That is all it takes. Not perfection, not expensive technology, just basic follow-through. And in every one of these cases, that follow-through did not happen. The records existed. The warnings were there. The cost of preventing each of these deaths was, in every case, a fraction of the fine that came after. A harness, a replacement battery, a brake repair, a safety guard put back in place, a pair of scaffold pins swapped out before a man stepped onto them. What was caught on record in these 5 cases is not just negligence. It is a choice, a quiet, undocumented, deliberate choice to move on. and hope for the best. And 5 people paid for that choice with everything they had. The cameras rolled, the reports were filed, and the deaths happened anyway. That is the part that should keep you awake. Not the accidents themselves, but the silence that came before them. The silence of a warning that was heard, recorded, and ignored. Because somewhere right now, in a workplace you may know well, there is a report sitting on a desk. And the only question that matters is whether anyone is going to read it.